Hi folks, so today is National Reading Aloud Day. It's a wonderful initiative. Basically the idea is to get more people to read out loud, especially kids, but for everybody. Not enough people read, and also reading aloud, it helps with a lot of things, your speech therapy, your cognizance of all kinds, as far as I believe. But the whole point about now is authors are encouraged to read for 15 minutes out loud of their work, and there's currently a thing going on in Monte Cassino. Today being Friday the 1st of February. So while I can't make it out there, I decided let me make a video, upload it, and at least spread some awareness. So what I've decided to do is to read from three short stories that I already have out there. The first one will be from Phoenix Fire, which is the first anthology I ever wrote for. The story is called What Remains. And the second will be from Ethereal. The story is called The Grey Man. And the last one will be an ebook that I submitted to an anthology called the CEA Past Your Reality Anthologies Volume 2. So let's get the ball rolling. I'll be reading first from this book, and it will be my short story called What Remains. It's amazing what you'll agree to when you're on fire. My father used to say that all the time. Every day he'd arrive home, place his cutting torch on the ground, and hoist me into his arms. I'd ask him why he was so late. He usually wasn't. And he'd tell me, well, it's amazing what you'll agree to when you're on fire. When I moved planetside, I swore I'd never live that life. I swore I'd never go down into the dark, to the place that took him away from me. No mining for me. And I swore it when I joined his former employer's company. I swore it when I got my mining ticket. I swore it when I became the company delivery guy. And I swore loudly when they sent me back. At least that's what they saw me do. And that's all that mattered. Anything to get me back inside and under their radar. Out the window, the view below me stretches from the heavens to the depths. Above me, the obsidian black of the cosmos, and below, the great grey expanse of the lunar surface, a ball of dust hovering above the earth, like a hammer waiting to fall. It's a small comfort when the heat shields slam into place and pass into the shadows of the moon. No light, no heat, and the shields do their best to cling to what warmth the transport contains. Still, the cold is good for the cargo. Good living ordnance, the only corporate-sanctioned drug in existence, and the mining industry's biggest open secret. Miners are forbidden to talk about it, and the company staunchly denies the existence of any substance abuse on their work sites, so naturally, everyone knows. The rules change when you're off-world and damn near freezing to death. Adapted from a military combat enhancer, glow speeds up the metabolic rate of miners working in the deep cold. You burn more energy, so your body produces more heat, and you work longer and harder. As long as the workers stay fed, they can keep on going. The physical burnout it causes is the furthest thing from any miner's minds, especially the young ones. They call it glow, for the warm, tingly sensation it delivers, and it makes me the most popular delivery boy in the system. I know we're getting close when the vid screens on the ship click on and start playing information films about the mine, the site, and what lies beneath the ground. The GenCore mining logo, two hands meeting to form a triangle, flashes across the screen. It's the same film every time. At least they're not telling me to fasten my seatbelt. Welcome to Big K, serving Earth's energy needs for over half a century, says the handsome male lead, his teeth glinting while his female counterpart stands beside him. Did you know that this site was once a war zone? She says, and she says it like I should be impressed. As the Freedom War raged on, neither side knew the riches they were about to unearth. You bet your sweet ass, honey, says Lewis, the co-pilot. You know I unearthed her. Right. Pull my other leg. It plays a tune, says Marla, the pilot. I'm serious. She's waiting for me back on Earth, with a restraining order in hand, I'll bet, I say. Marla's laugh echoes through the cabin as the smiling actors continue. Keenanite, cleaner than sunshine, mankind's gateway to the stars. And all thanks to war, man's oldest hobby, I think. The craft you're currently cruising in is powered by the kite mined at this facility. "And yet no free samples," says Marla as Lewis boos in mock disapproval. I guess the miner's blood helps lube the machines. I realize I've spoken out loud when I catch a look from Lewis. I look away after mouthing an apology. I got too comfortable for a minute there. Focus, Cole. You're on company property. The grey man. How long has he been standing there? The thought had been plaguing him since he first noticed the shambling, shuffling beggar 50 meters behind him. His car had failed him a half an hour ago, and as he trudged, that nagging sense of foreboding had swept out of his imagination and into the real world. Wonderful, he thought as he quickened his pace. The car had just been serviced. Everything was supposed to be in working order. That's what he paid people for. That's why he worked so hard. And now this. Gordon had been on his way home from another meeting, his mind on 1,000 different things. His GPS, all-knowing and all-powerful, had directed him to a faster route, one that would save him 5 minutes. 5 minutes. As though that time mattered now. Stranded, he'd wasted that much time and more trying to find cell reception or a working payphone, but both seemed to have moved out of the mold-flecked slum he found himself in. The buildings loomed over him, grey cement faces mottled by acid rain, regarding him with a casual disinterest. The scenic route would have been Oz compared to this. He realized he'd never noticed how loud his footsteps could be as they echoed off the buildings. A scuffing sound drew his attention. The beggar was closer. Gordon looked back at the illuminated screen of his phone, the GPS telling him that he was now only 1 block away from the mission steeple church, an aged structure still servicing the spiritual needs of the community. He'd been surprised when he looked at his surroundings and found them familiar through the decay. Once, a long time ago, a cramped apartment had been home to him, his electrician father, and bookkeeping mother. They moved away when the corporation started buying up the older parts of the city to build something tall and shiny and phallic. When Gordon's father got hired to wire those new buildings, the death of the community paid for his family's way out, and though his family had opted for the green safety of the suburbs, he always came back to help out. And perhaps it was guilt or a way to gain absolution. As a lawyer, he'd done pro bono work for the community as they fought the oncoming threat of gentrification. The corporate sentiment was always the same. This neighborhood would be so much prettier if it weren't for all those people. Later, the firm he worked for became those corporations' attack dog. He couldn't remember when the need for a paycheck had beaten out his nobility, but he soon found himself defending the same developers he'd once fought. The term pariah stuck in his head. He breathed a silent prayer, touching his mother's rosary around his neck, hoping his executive body would outpace the trailing pauper. Glass crunched underfoot. And he stopped. Why did he stop? His senses were screaming, urging him to run. Gordon turned and found himself staring into the shadowed darkness of the beggar's hooded head, an emptiness where the face should be, and floating in the void, 2 slitted eyes hovered. He stumbled back, letting out a gasp of surprise, his foot slipping. The beggar's hand shot out, seizing Gordon's arm and righting him in one fluid motion. His grip stung for a moment, as though he'd burnt the skin, the heat of his hand passing through Gordon's coat. He locked eyes with the beggar. A gaunt face with sunken doll's eyes stared out at him out of the hooded gloom. The glow was gone. Reflexively, Gordon yanked his arm loose before standing awkwardly in silence for a second. Realizing his rudeness, he mumbled a thank you and resumed his walk, his pace a step shy of speed walking. The beggar didn't follow. After a minute of keeping this pace, he slowed, feeling foolish and a bit guilty at his reaction. The man had helped him. The man. He'd had a strong grip, not addled by drugs or alcohol. Gordon thought that he could have at least paid him, the thought being dismissed almost as soon as it appeared. Presenting him with money would have been a demeaning gesture, and also realistically, you didn't take out your wallet in this neighborhood. The grey concrete gave way to old brick apartments. He reached a corner, a street light, offering an island of light in the growing dimness. He paused, checking his GPS, getting his bearings. He saw that if he cut through the back alleyway that was next to him, he'd make it to the church in 5 minutes. He hoped he could trust the directions this time. It was then that he heard it. The lack of sound. The drone of the city had fallen away. The humming streetlights had fallen silent. A pressure had begun to build in his ears as though he were in an airliner. High above the city, the hair on the nape of his neck stood on end, and there was a dryness to the air as though the clouds above were hoarding their cargo. He flexed his jaw, trying to release the pressure. Once, twice, finally the pressure in his ears released with a pop, which was when he heard it. Footsteps approaching at speed. Wand by Vittorio Leonardi. 1. Somewhere near Saratoga Street. He definitely hit him 3 times, in the arm, the jaw, and the chest. No one survives that, and yet as Deacon pushed through the narrow gap in the buildings, he saw the blood trail he was tracking grow thinner. His target's bleeding had nearly stopped, and the blood didn't look right either. It shimmered at first, and then quickened, turned to black in the light. What had happened to the sound? He was standing in one of the cavernous spaces of the inner city, those spaces behind high walls that hid their squalor behind aspirations of wealth. He could barely hear the traffic churning all around him. The sounds of people, traffic, and life. They echoed off the aerochromatic walls. As he slowly made his way deeper into the condemned building. The child, focus on the child, focus on finding the child. The alleyway emptied out into a vacant lot surrounded by high walls and even taller evergreens. The air was cooler here. No, not cooler, cold. It was as though no heat reached here. He could see no one, but knew he was being watched. The shadows were thin here, as if they only diffused the light. The air was heavy with moisture. They couldn't have simply vanished. He searched for a track. There were 2 of them, the man and the child. The child would be struggling, at least he hoped so. So many times he'd read cases of children being taken and never fighting back. He hoped this time would be different. Deacon became more frantic as time passed. 5 minutes became 10, 10 became 15. He kicked over stones and loose piles of leaves. Nothing. He stopped, the sweat on his neck adding to the 2-day stain already there. "Where did you go?" he asked the air. "Where would you have gone? You like the tunnels, the dark. It's where you do your best work." Deacon began to pace in a circle. He eyed the path he had taken to where he now stood. There was nothing here. He began to tap his foot. The tapping became a stomp of anger. There was a snap beneath his foot, a click off to the right. He drew his weapon level with the sound. Nothing moved. He scanned the ground for the mechanism that caused the noise, but found nothing. It was then that his eyes lit upon the arch of a circle. A metal door was set into the ground, camouflaged by a thick layer of detritus, purposefully attached to hide the doorframe. He tried the edge. It was so light. The door swung open slightly, silently, revealing a long, dark fall into nothing. There was neither a rope nor a ladder. Then he heard the laughter, like the tinkling giggle of a toddler. It was behind him. He was in mid-turn, his pistol coming around when he felt the push, a gentle shove really. The laughter was all around him now as he overbalanced and fell over his own feet, head first into the hole. And then all was darkness. 2. Elsewhere. "So?" said the elf. The question hung in the air, like an unwanted guest at a funeral. No one could see that he was an elf. No one ever could. He suspected that children could for a time, but lost the sight as they aged. He was thankful for it. He'd spent his time as a sideshow in the Fey courts as an ambassador, and that had been enough. Though he briefly wondered how his attire of an emerald green shirt and jacket, cream long trousers, and brown boots would look to the humans. Still, he felt suitably attired to be a private investigator. Chief Turner opened a drawer abruptly, bringing Killick back to the present. I'm not going to tell you everything. You want this? You can go find it, said Turner. Done, said Killick, not caring for the terms so much as the clue. Turner continued with his filing, never making eye contact with the elf. The veil had that effect. It averts the eyes of those unwilling to see the truth. Turner was a big man, nearly 2 meters tall, barrel-chested, with a beard that reminded Killick of dwarven stock, as unlikely as that was. After all, the dwarves kept to themselves. Turner seemed to shrink into his chair as he sat, as though the secret he was to tell was taking a piece of him as penance. Killick took a seat across from him and waited. That was my 15 minutes for National Reading Aloud Day. Please do yourself a favor. If you're not reading, try. I know it's a pain. I use audiobooks a lot of the time because of the amount of driving I do, but still, it's a cool thing to do. It's better to just throw yourself into that. I mean, books, stacks of these are essentially like binge watching a thing, except it's not as passive. I highly recommend it, so go for it. Spread the word. It's very cool. And yeah, I will see you again. Thanks very much for this. I will be putting a link to all the books that I've read from in the comment section below. You've been very cool. Thanks a lot.